Welcome back to NextGen Marin's podcast, Priced Out, where we discuss and explore some of the biggest issues facing Marin County. This week we are joined by Eric Lucan of the Novato City Council, where we discuss Novato's history and his vision for the city's future. You can view more podcasts on our website at nextgenmarin.com.
Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Crumhout and welcome to NextGen Marin's podcast. We have Jonathan DeHaan with us today.
Hi.
And we have a very special guest. He is on the Novato City Council and he was the mayor of Novato in 2014. He's the chief marketing officer of Mike's Bikes and he's a Novato native. Welcome, Eric Lucan.
Great, thank you. So glad to be here with you this morning.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Novato is my hometown. I've been here, pretty much my whole life. Grew up in the area, graduated from Novato schools, and have always kind of been involved in the community. Glad to serve on the city council since 2011. And just kind of my way of giving back to a city that gave so much to me growing up. I'm married. My wife and I just celebrated our 9-year wedding anniversary, and we've got thank you. And we've got our first little one on the way, a little baby boy coming in December. So
how exciting!
Just a little bit about myself there, and if there's anything else I could elaborate on, let me know.
Yeah. So you grew up in Novato. How did you come to be on the Novato City Council?
Yeah, a great question. So I didn't grow up in a very, when I say political family, politics was never something that I really aspired to. I don't even view being on the city council as political. But I got involved just through giving back to the community. My undergraduate degree is in ministerial studies, and I started as a youth director, youth minister with a church in town. So I worked with a lot of young people in the community. Also, even when I was in high school, I started coaching youth sports. I was a soccer coach. I was a volleyball coach. So all of that kind of, I think, inspired me to give back to my local community. I went away to grad school, got my MBA, moved back to Novato in 2006. And there was an opening on the Parks and Recreation Commission, which I felt that'd be a good way for me to continue to give back, something I'm passionate about, parks and recreation for all ages in Novato. So I was appointed to that commission in 2007, ended up chairing that commission, which is all advisory to the city council. And then in 2008, 2009, when the economy was not doing well, the first thing cities started cutting were their parks and recreation budgets. And that got me involved going to city council meetings for the first time, advocating for parks, listening to their budget discussions with my business hat on from just having got my MBA, and thought that I had something to give back to the city with regards to how they were making decisions for the long-term future of the community. And as a young person getting involved, knowing that I was going to be in Novato for many years, ultimately raising a family in Novato, I felt that I had something to give. So I was elected in 2011 and been on the council ever since.
So how did you left Novato and then you came back? Mm-hmm. Do you think that a lot of young people are doing that today?
I do. Some by choice. Having grown up, been to high school here, a lot of my friends said, "Oh, I just want to get out of Novato. I want to leave Novato." But I think very quickly they realized really how great of a place it is to live here in Novato, the Bay Area as a whole. And I think a lot of people do want to come back. So some people just leave out of their own desire, and unfortunately, I think what we're seeing now is a lot of people are leaving because they have no other choice. The cost of living here, of starting a career, starting a family, getting into the housing market is causing people that would prefer to live here, maybe close to home, maybe close to their folks as they're getting older, would love to stay in the area and just can't, and that's difficult to see. A lot of my own friends have been faced with that, and even in my job, I work for Mike's Bikes. We're headquartered right here in Novato, and we have a lot of employees that are unfortunately having to just move farther and farther away to have a quality of life that they want.
Mm-hmm. And that has a massive impact on performance. So if you're spending, hours commuting every day, traffic, or even not in traffic, the cost, the time, and all that other stuff, not just employees, but also first responders, police, fire, teachers, caretakers, it has a huge impact on our community. And it seems like a lot of people just look at housing as, hey, it's just housing, we don't have enough, but we'll figure it out. But they don't realize all the externalities that housing has on an entire community. And looking at the different options that we have for housing, ADUs, the tiny houses. You had mentioned earlier that a lot of people are talking about putting in these tiny houses, but there haven't been, systems implemented to start doing this. What are some solutions that we have that we can start building more housing in the Novato?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right about all of the impacts of not addressing the issue. We desperately need more housing. There's no way to dance around that. There is a need for more housing, and the impacts. You talk about traffic. You talk about even the perception of one way to manage growth. There's a philosophy of, well, if we just don't build more housing, then that'll manage growth, and we won't have the traffic problems. Well, what's happening now? People are doubling up, tripling up in homes. Overcrowding parking, overcrowding traffic. So it's going to happen one way or another. There's going to be growth in the area. So either we don't plan for it and don't manage it and don't build any housing, or we actually manage it. One of the things you mentioned, tiny homes. You hear it. It's kind of a buzzword. You talk to any politician, they say, "Oh yeah, it's a great idea. I think we should do it." But where is it actually happening? I think it would be great if Novato could be out in the forefront of it, whether it's a pilot. You have to create the zoning that would allow it. Most zoning ordinances on the books, or whether in your general plan, don't have a carve out for that because it wasn't anticipated many, many years ago. But we need to be able to react quickly. We need to be able to find developers that are doing that. And maybe we start small. Maybe it's 10 homes in one location or 15 homes here or there, and call it a pilot and see what the interest is. See how much you're able to get a unit available for either a lower rent or a lower purchase price.
Mm-hmm. And a big part in development and why a lot of people don't do it is uncertainty.
Yep. And
you have an MBA, the biggest thing in business is if there's uncertainty, you don't want to go for that kind of deal. And earlier you had mentioned that you want to have streamlined processes for planning departments determining how long things should take. Can you touch more upon that?
Yeah, so I think the first step that we need to do is we need to look at what is the current status. And one of the things that I'm asking our staff to do, along with my colleagues on the City Council, is to just look at our general development timeline. I kind of view it as a matrix, where on one axis you would have the project size of small, medium, or large. And then on the other axis, you would have the project complexity. Is where the project is going, is it already zoned for that and it's very simple, or it just needs a minor change, to where it's a very complex project. And we could then plot out how much time does it take to develop a small project with simple complexity, or how long does it take to get a large complex with, or a large project with very significant complexities through the process. So I think to start with is we map that out and we look at, on average, how much time are all of these taking, and then ask ourselves as a council, as a community, is this realistic and does this work? I think once we go through that process, we'll find that some of the timelines are keeping people from coming to the table. And then if we find out that, all right, this type of project with this type of land use change is going to take 24 months and it really needs to be 12 to 18 months, what changes do we need to make as a city to reduce that timeline?
And now, how does the process work now to get a permit? What's the, not step by step, definitely, because there are many of them, but what's the average time now? And if a permit does take 2 years, 3 years, what effect does that have on businesses and opening more doors in Novato?
Yeah, it really depends on the type of project. So right now we have just gone through our general plan amendment. The general plan is a 20-year document that really kind of sets out several programs throughout the entire city, but it also has an impact on zoning and land use. So we are trying to think ahead with our general plan to allow for those opportunities. But so if a project comes through that is in line with the general plan, then it's relatively simple to go through the process. There aren't additional approvals that are needed. Very rarely does that happen. Because the general plan is a 20-year document and we are making it without any proposals on the table, we are trying to anticipate the future. And we don't always get it right. We just try to do the best we can. So when a proposal comes forward that maybe is good for Novato but doesn't meet the general plan or the zoning, and there's a change that needs to be made, how can we speed up that review or change that needs to be made for projects that are maybe overwhelmingly deemed good for Novato?
Well, that's the thing. Being that the urban growth boundary is a very big topic in Novato, and it is important. It protects Marin and the environment, and it makes sure that we do have that nature and that beauty that Marin is so greatly known for. But in my opinion, I don't think that there's too much land that is already zoned for, say, commercial or some kind of housing. Like we have the Peony development on Grant, and that has, they're talking about building some housing there, which would be great, along with commercial. And I think it's been found that mixed use is the new way to go. That's the way in order to, go through the permit process a little bit quicker. And I know that developers that have worked in Marin before try to work with design review and the standards that they know that they're going to face. So I think developers can somewhat anticipate what they're going to have to deal with design review, but what role does the city council play in new housing developments? What can you guys control or contribute in order to help developers in building new housing?
Yeah, we play a significant role, and we can. One of the ways that we can streamline it is by creating that zoning so that a housing proposal could come forward that has already been vetted. And an EIR has already been done. A good example of that would be the affordable housing overlay zones that we established several years back, where in order to meet our housing element, we established an affordable housing overlay on 5 sites throughout Novato. Through that process and through all the study and everything that has been done, if somebody were to come forward and propose housing for those specific sites, there is no additional approval that's needed. It has already been vetted. Unfortunately, many years have passed, and not a single one of those sites has been developed.
Can you give us an example of one of those sites, or a couple examples?
Yeah. So Landing Court
Right.
is an area where we did an affordable housing overlay. Another spot is a 4-acre parcel of land on North Redwood Boulevard on your way to the Buck Center. Some of the things that we have found, though, it kind of goes back to we put these parameters in place, and so much time has passed that those parameters don't always work for the person who's going to be making the proposal. So most of the times when these proposals come forward, they're asking for some sort of variance or some sort of change or something that doesn't quite work. Well, when you do that, it has to go back through the council and through the public process, and that's a lot of times what can slow things down.
Right. Well, we do have, you mentioned Landing Court. There's actually a project proposed that I'm sure you know about. It's in the conceptual design review stage. I went to the initial meeting, and they're having another meeting, I think, in a week and a half. They propose to have about, 30 homes there, and it's on a hill, which is a little bit difficult. I think that's interesting. There's a lot of hilly terrain in Marin, especially in Novato, where maybe things could be built or it's zoned as open space. What do you think about converting some of the open space to areas for affordable housing?
Looking at some of the open space we have, one of the things that I think is so great about Novato and about Marin is the open space that surrounds us. I really have to. I'm very fortunate to the generations and that went before me that preserved a lot of that to make this place really, really incredible, really what it is. At the same time, we desperately need more housing. I think right now in Novato, there's a lot of infill opportunities that personally make more sense. I look at our downtown and I think there's opportunity there before we start looking at open space opportunities. It brings people closer to town. You look at downtown Novato, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. A good example is the Northwest Quadrant area, which is something that we're making some changes to in our updated general plan that could maybe help incentivize some rehab in that area. I think that's probably more the low-hanging fruit before we start looking at open space opportunities.
Because a big thing we've noticed when trying to do any kind of construction is you're either limited by height, which is about 35 feet depending on the zoning, or you can't go out because of the urban growth boundary. But I know that you're allowed to allocate, I believe, 10 acres to affordable development. That's part of the urban growth boundary. But do you think that's enough? Do you think that's a big enough solution to fix our housing crisis, or is it just putting a Band-Aid on a big sore?
So that's a great question. I think any additional unit helps. At the same time, I don't think that we're going to be able to fix the housing crisis that we have. When you look at what it costs to build these days and the sheer number of units that would need to be there, it's not something that we can solve, but it's definitely something that we can manage much better than we have been managing. You look at our infrastructure, we will never be able to build that many more units. Even in Novato, we're never going to have another Hamilton development with that many homes. But I think what's hard for me is when we do try to build just 5 or 10 units in this section or in this area of town, and it faces sometimes some very, very strong opposition. That's what's a little more difficult, because I don't see 10 units here or going up one story there as completely changing the character of Novato. I think those are the things that I wish there was more widespread support for, and that could certainly help get some of these housing units through the process a little faster.
And a big thing we've noticed at a lot of these meetings is it's always kind of the same people that are opposing the same things. And we had a meeting with Judy Arnold, and she was talking, the big thing in Marin is traffic. Mm-hmm. Everybody's always talking about traffic. And I mean, it is a big issue if it takes a long time to get around to certain places. But do you think it's going to take, an inflow of new people, younger people like us, or, a lot of seniors are facing the housing crisis also, to come in and kind of dilute the voice of people saying no, no, no all the time? Or do you think it's kind of a permanent mindset in Marin that's kind of never going to change?
I like to think that it's starting to change a little bit. When I first got elected, there was a big debate about just affordable housing in Novato and Marin as a whole. And I think there was just a categorical opposition to affordable housing and the term affordable housing, and maybe even just housing in general. But that was at a time when we were in a recession, and home prices were significantly depressed. Market rate homes were sometimes selling at the same price as an affordable home. And, a lot of people lost a significant amount of value in their home and equity. And, whether that fueled some of the debate, I don't know. Now what we're looking at is it has reached such a unmanageable status where families are seeing, their kids or their parents being forced out of the area. And I hope that's starting to change the mindset of, well, wait a minute, now this is really starting to impact me. We need to do something about it. Also, the other thing that I alluded to earlier is I think for some folks that maybe were categorically opposed to housing in thoughts that this is the only way we can alleviate traffic and keep the community small or whatever that philosophy or mindset is, they're seeing that the folks are doubling up in homes. You have more people living in, or doubling up in apartments. So we're still seeing the impacts of that growth and the extra cars and the extra traffic. So if that's going to happen regardless, why don't we manage it? And then the last thing that I think is starting to change the mindsets is just general affordability. Now in Novato, a family of 4 making $105,000 a year qualifies for affordable housing.
It's actually 117,000 now.
100, you're right, 117,000 for a family of four. That's a good income, and that also could just be a one person's income, and maybe one of the spouses is at home with the kids. One person in the household is working, and they'd be qualifying for affordable. So I hope. And I think that all of those aspects are starting to change the conversation around housing in general.
Yeah, I mean, NextGen is relatively new. I think that we've noticed there are a lot of housing advocacy groups now. I think a lot of people are starting to take inventory of the fact that there is a lack of affordable housing here. I do agree with what you said about there being a stigma around the word affordable. I think that draws a lot of attention because people may think of crime or, what kind of people that affordable housing is going to apply to. And really, it's my coworker Jonathan and I sitting right here. It's young people who live with their parents, as opposed to, you were able to move out and, you bought a house. How old were you when you bought your first house?
So I was not in Novato. I was 23. This was in Atlanta area where I went to grad school. But there, you brand new homes, 3,000 square foot homes are $250,000.
And that's unheard of here.
That's not even the down payment here.
Yeah. So for me, if I hadn't moved out of the area for 3 years, bought a home with 10% down, sold it, came back to the area, and then was able to buy again during the time when lenders were giving loans out to really anybody that needed them. I probably wouldn't have been able to get started here. But we're missing that starting point, and yeah, it's having impacts on our entire economy. One of the things that concerns me, if we don't start making some changes in it, one of the things that we do know about Marin is that we are a rapidly aging community. Well, what happens as more and more folks move into retirement years, there's a shift that happens in their spending. And they start spending more on the service economy than the goods economy. Well, the service economy needs to be supported by individuals that are typically making under $117,000 a year, and those individuals need a place to live. And I think we're going to have an even greater crisis on our hands, is providing the services for a lot of the retirees in our community. We're already starting to see it because we have workers that are commuting in from all around the Bay Area to provide these services and then commuting all the way home. And that's just to serve the population we have now. When you look 10, 20 years out from now, it's concerning.
Well, that's the interesting thing. There's a proposed assisted living center in San Rafael, Mission, and Lincoln, and there's been some controversy around that about whether it should be for seniors or for workforce housing, given its great location. And it is important to house seniors and recognize that Marin does have an aging demographic here, majority, but it's important to also recognize that the people who are going to be helping these seniors, perhaps, say in an assisted living facility, where are they going to live? And people need to realize that if you don't provide workforce housing, that's the main source of traffic, is you have people commuting from Sacramento or, Vallejo or Benicia to Novato for their jobs. And people hate traffic, people love the environment, and they want to spare the air. But I think that completely contradicts people's beliefs. And it's important that people recognize that.
Absolutely.
And just looking at the emissions themselves, there are over 60,000 cars a day that drive into Marin. So just looking at that number, you can have as many housing developments as you want. They're not going to emit the levels of 60 to 70,000 cars idling in traffic all day long. But also, if infrastructure gets knocked down, when Highway 37 got flooded, there was a huge problem with staffing. Mm-hmm. But also, it also reflects in the price of everything. So if you have to pay somebody to commute for 2 hours a day, it's gas, insurance, wear and tear. It's going to reflect in your morning latte or your shirts at the laundromat. Any of those factors just increases the cost of living, even for people who can afford to be here. It's just reducing the amount of money they could use, for important things. And what you mentioned earlier is when people get older, they spend less. I mean, they already have a couch, they already have a TV, they already have these kind of things. People like us who are, younger, who want to move into houses or even rent apartments, we're going to be buying all these other things, which boosts the economy. So I mean, just the predictions that we've done, if Marin stays the way it is, the economy is not going to be doing well in a few years. And I think we really need to start looking at new ways to start building in housing. And we had Rachel Gittes here talking about lily pad homes and the work she's done with the ADUs and the JDUs. But do you think that's a real solution? I mean, we talked about tiny homes a little bit earlier. And do you think that's a real solution to this crisis? I mean, I know it's going to fix it a little bit, but do you see it as something that could actually do something?
I think it's a part of the puzzle. As I mentioned, I don't. Unfortunately, this is one of these issues that I don't think that we're going to solve, but I think that we need to definitely manage better. ADUs, accessory dwelling units, are a great piece, but I think at the same time, they're kind of viewed as, well, we've done this, and now we don't really need to tackle the bigger issue of housing. I think we need both. I don't think it's one or the other. And I still think a lot of work needs to be done on these second units. They're not feasible for a lot of folks purely because of the parking requirements. With some more for an accessory dwelling unit, a junior unit, because it's within the confines of the existing home, typically doesn't trigger additional parking. But some folks don't necessarily want an extra unit inside their home, and they want to do an actual accessory unit, and they've got the land for it, but those typically trigger an additional parking space. I think it's something we need to be paying attention to. We look at housing as a whole. One thing that could be a significant game changer, just to kind of put my futuristic hat on, is we hear all this talk and chatter about autonomous vehicles, and that being 20, 30 years from now. It's interesting to think about. If truly transportation becomes transportation as a service, and people are summoning vehicles from their home, and you no longer have 2 cars per household, what happens to this 400 or 500 square foot of space that everybody has in their home called a garage? If they don't own their own cars and everybody's summoning vehicles, we have potential there, and I think we need to start thinking about that now. Or maybe there's a way if right now garage conversions are typically not allowed because you need to have 2 spots of covered parking for a residence. But if somebody's willing to have one less vehicle, is there a way that we can really start to get creative?
So you mentioned that's 2 required spots. Even if the homeowner only has 1 car, they still have to have space for 2, or is it more for the
I believe so, and I probably don't quote me on this one, although I guess it's on video. But I'd have to double check I believe for a single family residence that it is required to have. It might be you're required to have 1 covered parking space, but I believe that you're required to have 2 parking spaces together, and the driveway does not count as the parking space.
Plus the extra per bedroom you'd have in an ADU, you'd have to factor that in also.
If you had a secondary unit in the backyard. If it's a junior accessory unit, it's inside the main home.
There's no parking requirement.
It typically doesn't trigger additional parking requirements.
Well, you seem like a proponent for alternative forms of transportation, being that you work for Mike's Bikes and you're on the SMART Commission, aren't you?
Yep, and so I'm on the TAM board, the Transportation Authority of Marin, and then also the SMART board.
So the downtown SMART station, unfortunately, is still not here, but I think we are making steps towards getting it for Novato. What can you tell us about the update on that?
It is absolutely happening. I couldn't be more excited about it. One of the things that I've been working on ever since I got elected to the council and appointed to the SMART board. When SMART originally was going to be coming to Novato, the city council at the time was faced with a very difficult decision of where to locate the 2 stops. And it was very clear, just because of the funding, that we were going to get 2 locations. And the decision at that time was made to put one up near Fireman's Fund, which was a major employer at the time, and the other one in Hamilton, but unfortunately it bypassed our downtown. There was this thought or idea that we can have a whistle stop in our downtown. and everybody was pretty excited about that. But I don't think anybody really understood what a whistle stop meant or what would be involved in having the train stop at a set location for people to get on and off. When I got on the smart board, because of the trains that were selected and the requirements for level boarding, these are not the types of trains that can just stop anywhere on the tracks and people can get on and off. You actually have to build a platform and have the infrastructure. And then what complicates it, because freight runs on the same rail, there's additional cost because the freight trains are wider than the commuter trains. So they would actually crash into the platform if you didn't have a second set of tracks. So if you go down to any of the smart platforms, you'll see what looks like a dual set of tracks. That's because the freight train veers off just a little bit to bypass the platform and then gets back on the main tracks. All of that costs money. So getting the train to stop in downtown was a little more difficult than just having a whistle stop. We needed a station. We needed the infrastructure. We needed the investment. That's what we did. We got a lot of regional grants to make it happen. All of the funding has been approved. It's in construction and hopefully should come online by the time the Larkspur extension comes online as well.
Next year.
Yeah. Probably end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what impacts do you think the smart train is going to have on Marin?
I think it's already having impacts. I'll tell you, for anybody that is commuting on it on a regular basis, it has probably changed their life, just in getting out of that traffic. Folks from Sonoma County that are commuting to Marin, it's now much more of a manageable commute.
It's pretty fast.
It is pretty, and if you're going during commute hours, just the change that it has on you as an individual is incredible. I know from a commuter that spent 4 years commuting from Novato into San Francisco every day. I was spending 2.5 hours a day just in commute traffic and getting to and from work. If there was a way to do that faster, I would have jumped on that opportunity. Now our commuters have an option besides getting on 101. And for those that are utilizing it, it's been a life changer for them.
Mm-hmm. I think the downtown smart station is a great step in the direction of revitalizing downtown Novato. I think that's been a pretty big, also a big topic for Novato. What are some of the things that the Novato City Council is doing in order to help revitalize downtown?
Yeah, so we got a lot of good things happening in downtown right now. We've got the smart station coming on board. We had a couple new businesses that opened up. We brought our city offices downtown several years ago. Copperfield's bookstore opened up. We've got Blue Barn Cafe, which has a location in Corte Madera and 2 in San Francisco.
Where DeBorba's used to be.
Just purchased the old DeBorba's Mary's Place. They just went through the design review commission, so that's happening. So we'll get a different style of regular open everyday restaurant in our downtown. But I think we're just getting started. There's a lot of opportunity in our downtown area. One of the things that I think we need more of are restaurants. When you look at the mix in our downtown of restaurants versus general retail comparative to a Petaluma or a San Rafael, we have far fewer restaurant spaces. We've got nail salons and banks and other types of service related locations. So how do we get more restaurants? Well, unfortunately it's very expensive to put in a new restaurant. Just with the health codes and permitting and requirements and grease traps and commercial kitchens, it's cost prohibitive for a lot of folks. So I would like to see if there's a way to create a city program, maybe with low interest loans, to convert some of those spaces that an individual can apply for. Because once a commercial space gets converted to a kitchen, it's always going to be a kitchen for the future. So if you could just turn it over once, then there's a good chance that's going to remain a restaurant in your downtown for many years to come. And I think it's something the city ought to invest in.
But what would you attribute to having such a low number of restaurants? Because in San Rafael, I see brand new things opening up all the time. I forget what the new one's called, but anyways, Would you attribute it to maybe the older demographic in Novato that don't go out as much and try and, because we noticed earlier we talked about spending, how, when you're older you try and save more because you don't know what medical expenses you might run into and all that kind of other stuff. Do you think it's due to the demographic in Novato why restaurants aren't doing so well, or what would you attribute to that?
No, I actually I think the demographics here, you look at our population, it's there. The demographics are absolutely here. We just don't have that critical mass yet, I believe, in our downtown area. But I think it's coming, and I think it's starting to shift. I know just from a business standpoint, if you're looking to open up a new restaurant, you're going to look at foot traffic, and you're going to look at who lives within probably a quarter mile to a half mile radius of that location. Some of these other downtown areas have a lot more housing in their downtown. They have a lot more of a population there. They have more of a lunchtime crowd with the businesses there. So the more that we create opportunity for that, everything works hand in hand with each other. If we provide a little more housing downtown, that's going to cause, I think, more business activity to happen, more businesses to stay open late, more restaurants to locate there. You've got transportation with the bus transit hub on Redwood and the SMART train on the other end of town. You have to walk 3 blocks through an historic old town to make a connection between the two. So good things are happening.
Yeah.
They just can't happen fast enough.
Right, yeah. I think that Novato is on the way. I've noticed over the past few years that, especially during lunchtime, it's very crowded. We have the restaurants on Grant, and those are doing well, and people argue that there's not enough parking. And I think that's a good problem to have rather than, having excessive parking and not enough business. I wonder about the nightlife of Novato, because I think of San Rafael, and that's where I live. I live in San Rafael, and downtown you'll always find a lot of people. They have Double Rainbow, which is open all night, and you have some bars, and downtown Novato does have some bars, but it would be nice to have maybe some other things that don't necessarily draw people to drink downtown. But I think that the nightlife is missing, and I think that younger people would like to see that, and I think that that would help draw some more business downtown. Do you think that there are some kind of options for, to draw more nightlife?
Yeah, so where it becomes tricky is, what is the city's role? How does the city incentivize that? And a lot of things that we can do, whether it be creating a program to convert a space to a restaurant more easily, providing an entertainment venue. We've got the downtown theater that has been struggling to get the remaining funds they need to complete that. But other things that the city can do, I think, when we look at that area as a whole, if we provided the opportunity for a little more housing, that can be that catalyst that sparks that. As far as going after a particular use or a particular business, typically is not the role that a city council would play. It's more setting the framework to bring in that investment. But I think part of it, going to some of those different operators and saying, help us understand why you are not flocking to Novato. What is it? Is it there's just not enough population in the area? Is it other constraints, so that we can try to identify what that issue is and maybe address it, and have a couple more tools in our tool bag.
And now that we're looking a lot at the future with smart train, transportation, downtown, we hear a lot of talk about transit-oriented housing.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view on transit-oriented housing?
I think if you're building more housing, it makes sense to put it near transit. It's
simple enough.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I know that causes some concerns for folks, because then if they see transit options happening, then they think the next step is that the housing is going to just follow around that area. But I think, some folks want to live near transit. Some folks don't want to have a car, and they want alternate forms of transportation. So I think it's something that we need to look at.
I think Novato has made it pretty easy to get around with the public transportation. The new bus terminal on Redwood is great, and the fact that there will be a downtown smart station is awesome. So it's exciting to increase the walkability of downtown and know that you guys are really thinking about people, and not just people that live in Novato, but people that live in Marin and Sonoma County. So
yeah, and we want Novato to be a destination area. Going back to the downtown smart station, really excited about once that is operational and online, because when you look at the different downtown areas where you can get on or off the SMART train, we're pretty well located. The downtown stop in Petaluma is a little bit of a couple blocks from there downtown. San Rafael, you're on kind of one end of their downtown. Where it will drop off in Novato is going to be at a great ideal location with what's surrounding it and maybe what the future brings.
And looking at the future, I mean, a lot of this stuff isn't going to happen if a lot of different people don't voice their opinion at meetings. And I mentioned earlier, a lot of people, it's a lot of the same people saying no, no, no to a lot of things. And earlier we had spoken about using technology to kind of leverage other people's voices. Do you think we could implement, like the city of Novato could implement systems where, people can make, and I know there's public comment and emails, but what if there was a way we could do a poll, instantly during a meeting? Or what if there was a way that I could comment without actually being there? Do you think that's just something that could actually work in a city council setting, or do you think it takes maybe using a workshop setting to get that done?
Yeah, I like your thinking. I would love to see Novato be on the forefront and the kind of the cutting edge of public involvement and public engagement. It probably is going to take a lot of thought to make sure that whatever system you put in place creates an opportunity for positive engagement. I think what you would hate to see happen is if there is a way of instant reaction that maybe it is used in a way that it shouldn't be. And those are just some things that we need to think through. But I think we definitely need to do a better job at it. When you look at how much is on our agenda and the time commitment to really track everything that's going on at a city level and to stay engaged and to understand your voice on that. I've been on the council for 7 years, and it's a lot to come from the outside and try to have a voice. It's an uphill battle, and I think Novato, we're ahead of the game with our public engagement, but still it's not uncommon that folks in the community hear about projects in the 11th hour, or they're coming to the game pretty late. And how do we change that so that everybody feels like they're not just a part of the process, but they're an integral part of the decision-making process?
But now, what has kept you motivated throughout these 7 years? Because I know for a lot of people, they would have just thrown in the towel and given up, all the opposition that a lot of people face. What keeps you motivated? And now that you're running again, it's probably something keeping you there. What is it?
Yeah, I really just genuinely love Novato, and I love this work. I love being out in the community. I think that I have something to give. I've got some experience under my belt now too. When I first got started, it was, hey, we need change, and we need fresh blood, and we need new voices. And I think we always need some of that, and the experience as well. And Novato's a great community. So now what keeps me going is, I've got a little son on the way coming in December, and my wife and I, we're not going anywhere. Novato is our home, and as long as I'm here, I want to make this the best community I can for the generation ahead of me, my folks, and the generation to come.
Yeah, it is nice to hear that you left and you came back and you're here for Novato. You're here for the people. I think it's clear that a lot of young people don't know about the housing crisis, or they're not involved. They don't know who's in charge of their local government. And I think a lot of people also think that they don't have enough time to commit to coming to meetings, and also maybe that their voices aren't heard, or that their opinion is not considered important. What do you think? What would you say to young people who have those opinions in order to try to get them involved, to encourage them to come to meetings?
Yeah. I would really encourage people to find ways to get involved, either with community groups or it doesn't necessarily mean just coming to a council meeting. You can track what's going on through our city website. I found one of the most effective ways if somebody's wanting to get involved or create change is not necessarily coming to a council meeting and speaking during public comment for 3 minutes, because that doesn't create a discussion. That doesn't create any sort of brainstorming or group thought. It's one person talking and then there's no response just because of the way that our public meetings are set up. We're, a town of 55,000, council members. We're out and about in the community. We don't, I'm accessible. All of our council members are accessible. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local council members. My contact information is publicly there on the website. Anybody could find me, call me. If you email me, I email you back. If you call me, I call you back. You don't have to deal. I don't have a staff. I don't have people doing this work for me. It's myself. And I try to engage as many conversations as I can. And I think if somebody wants to get involved or wants to see change take place, start by just reaching out to your council members. Reach out to me directly. Would love to have a conversation.
And now, as we wrap this up, what are your goals and what do you see Novato looking like 5 to 10 years from now? What is it? What do you want to see on Grand Avenue? What are your, what would you like to see your child to do when, they grow up?
Yeah. Novato is a great community. It has been for many, many years, but there's some things that we can do a little bit better. I would like Novato to be a more inclusive place. I would like Novato to be a place where young professionals can get a start and not feel like they have to go away and then hopefully come back to one day. I would like to see us bring in more business. I think if we bring in more business and jobs to the community, that could certainly help. And then, from just out and about in the community, we could use a little more life in our downtown. And you hear that from most everybody you talk to. A little more life in our downtown might come with some more challenges. It might make parking a little bit worse before it ultimately gets better. But I think in the long run, it's all going to be good for the community. So hope to just build on the great city and community that Novato already is.
Well, Eric, thank you for coming in today. This
Yeah,
podcast has been very, very amazing. And I guess nice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you for having me as a guest, and hope to come back sometime soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. You can find more of our podcast episodes on our website at nextgenmarin.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to stay updated on all things NextGen Marin.